Hey everyone, this is Anirudh from Edureka. In this session, let me walk you through on how you can learn and make use of exceptions in Python. Guys, this session is intended to be useful for anyone considering to kickstart their learning about Python and need some insight on how you can go about making use of exceptions to make coding very easy for you. So the focus is basically on approaching the language in the easiest way possible and to find out what it has to offer to the community and all of the learning enthusiasts out here. So let's begin by checking out the agenda for the session. We'll start by checking out why we need exception handling first. Later, we'll check out what an exception actually means. Followed by that, we'll be walking through the entire process of how we can handle an exception. And lastly, we'll look at how easy it is to code with Python, where we'll take a programming approach and learn the concepts through code. Now that we're done with the agenda, without further ado, let's begin by checking out why we need exception handling. Well, to understand the concept, let me quickly walk you through a very simple scenario. Consider the case where you're dividing any number by 0. What will happen? Can you divide a number by 0? You cannot, correct? But how would a kid approach this problem? The kid would think that you can actually use regular division to divide something by 0. So you're dividing something by nothing, so it stays the same. Something like this, right? Little does the kid know that this is wrong. Now check out how a programmer would approach the same concept. Well, it is established that dividing by 0 is not possible mathematically. So as programmers, we know it is not correct. So this basically leads to two cases, either an exception or an error. So a Python program terminates as soon as it encounters an error. Well, in Python, an error can be either a syntax error or an exception. And it is as simple as that. Well, let us actually divide by 0 for fun, guys. So this is what happens in Python. Python presents us with this beautiful error message saying that it cannot divide something by 0. Well, in fact, let us head to PyCharm, which is my IDE for coding in Python, so we can actually walk through this practically. So guys, here I am in my PyCharm. So let me quickly go ahead and type out some simple code for you guys. So let us start with y equal to 10. We can actually print y by 0 now. So let me quickly go ahead and run this in the console. So as you can check out, it says 0 division error. Division by 0 is not possible. So you cannot divide anything by 0. So let's establish that at this point, guys. That was good enough, right? So let's get started then. Let us quickly check out what exception handling actually is. Well guys, to get a clear picture of what that is, we need to start with understanding the definition for both exception and exception handling. Well, what is an exception? Guys, an exception is an event which occurs normally during the execution of a program that disrupts the normal flow of the program's instruction. So instead of the program actually executing evenly and nicely, there is actually a disruption in between the code. So this we basically call as an exception. So next, what is exception handling? Guys, this is the process of actually responding to an occurrence of an exception. As simple as that. So basically the process of responding to the occurrence during compilation of exceptional statements which require special processing is actually what is exception handling, guys. So this is basically done because of the change in the normal flow of the program execution. Well, it is a very simple concept and I'm sure at the end of this session you guys will agree. Well, at this point, what do you think of exception handling in Python, guys? Head to the comment section and let me know what you think so we can interact there. And now that we know what exception handling is, we need to understand how the entire process of exception handling works. So let us check it out. First, let us walk through what happens in Python. So let us say the user makes an error. What happens next? Guys, when you think about it, it is either the user that finds out the error or Python will actually tell you what the error is, correct? So once you know what the error is and you know where it is, you can basically start analyzing it to know if it is fixable or not. Well, if it is fixable, how can you go about doing that? Well, if it isn't, nothing to worry. Guys, Python is so good that no matter on what level you mess up, there is always a way out of it, guys. So now if it's fixable, how can we handle the exception? Check out the image on the right side. So we need to first find the error. If we cannot do it, Python will find out for us. Well, next is to make sure you take caution while coding if you think that there is going to be an error in that particular piece of code. Well, remember the word try at this point, alright? And later we'll actually fix the error and we call this as catch. Just remember the keywords for now and we'll be walking through these in detail in the following slides. In fact, let us begin by checking it out right now. So guys, these are some of the important terms that you need to take a note of before starting to code and understanding exceptions. So first we have try. Well, try is basically the keyword which is used to keep the code segment under check. So whatever code you put under try is actually the code under scrutiny, guys. And next we have except. Well, except is a segment which is actually used to handle the exception, guys. So how do we know that the exception has occurred? If our piece of code in the try block has actually caused an exception, then we can handle it in the except block. And how do we use else? Well, else is basically run when no exceptions exist, guys. And lastly, we have finally. Finally will run even if there is an exception. Finally will run if there is not an exception as well. So I want you guys to note this at this point of time, and this will help you a lot on the coming slides, guys. So now coming back to Python, this is what it visually looks like. We first have the try block where we run a piece of code. And next we have the except where the code actually runs only when there is an exception in the try block. And if there are no exceptions, then we run the else block, guys. And lastly, no matter what, exception or no exception, we run the finally block always, guys. Sounds simple, right? Well, it actually is. And now that we are familiar with the process of exception handling, let us check out how we can go about understanding this using Python practically, guys. Well, syntax errors occur when the parser detects an incorrect statement. Well, check out the tiny arrow on the left side here. Well, this is basically to indicate where the parser ran into the syntax error. Well, in this particular example, there were too many brackets, right? So there was an extra closing bracket. Well, if you actually remove it and run it, you will actually get a different error this time. Well, check on the right side part of the code. Well, this time you actually ran into an exception error. Well, this type of code occurs whenever syntactically correct Python code results in an error, guys. So the last line of the message indicated is what type of an exception error that you actually ran into. Well, in this particular case, it is zero division error, and it says that the integer division or modulo by zero is not possible. So this is basically the same case that I showed you in PyCharm a while ago. But instead of showing the message exception error, Python details what type of exception error was encountered. Well, as I mentioned, in this case, it was a zero division error, right? Well, Python comes with various built-in exceptions as well as the possibility to create self-defined exceptions as well. And now that we are clear with that, let us check out how we can go about raising an exception on our own. So we can basically make use of raise to throw an exception if a condition occurs. The statement can be complemented with a custom exception. Well, if you want to throw an error when a certain condition occurs using raise, you can actually go about it like the following piece of code you actually see on the screen. And when you run this piece of code, you'll be greeted with the following output, guys. So it says exception x should not exceed 5 and the value of x was 10. So let me quickly jump back to PyCharm and we can execute this there. So guys, I'm in my PyCharm right now, so I've quickly typed out the code for you guys. So let me quickly go ahead and run it and we can check out the error. As you can see, it says exception x should not exceed 5 and the value of x was 10. Perfect, right? So let's quickly jump back to the presentation to check what's next. So the program basically comes to a halt and displays our exception to screen, right? So this basically offers clues about what went wrong. And now that we're clear with that, we can actually proceed to checking out the assertion error, guys. So instead of waiting for a program to crash midway, you can actually start by making an assertion in Python. Well, we assert that a certain statement is actually met. And if this condition turns out to be true, then excellent, the program can continue. But if the condition turns out to be false, you can have the program to throw an assertion error exception for you guys. Well, have a look at the following example on your screen. Well, this is basically where it is asserted that the code can be executed in a Linux system, guys. So if you run this code on a Linux machine, the assertion passes. If you were to run this code on a Windows machine, the outcome of the assertion would be false. And what would happen? Well, definitely the result would be something like this, right? So it would basically present us with an assertion error and says that this code runs only on Linux, right? So I'm using a Windows desktop in this particular case. So let me quickly open up my PyCharm and then we can actually run this piece of code to check out our exception, guys. So I'm back in my PyCharm and I've typed out the code, guys. So let me quickly go ahead and run this. As you can check out, since this is a Windows machine, it says this code can run on Linux only. But this particular case, this assertion would be true if you were actually running this on a Linux machine, guys. So if any of you guys are using Linux machine, make sure to try it out. And on that note, let's quickly come back to the presentation, guys. Well, in this particular example, throwing an assertion error is the last thing that the program will do. The program will definitely come to a halt and it will not continue, guys. But what if that is not what you want? What if you want something different from this, or that you want the program to continue while displaying an exception for you guys? Well, now that we actually have a fair idea about how we can go about understanding exceptions, let us dive right into the heart of exceptions now. Yes, I'm talking about the try and except block, guys. So basically, the try and except block in Python is used to catch and handle exceptions. Well, Python basically executes code following the try statement as a normal part of the program. The code that follows the except statement is the program's response to any exception in the preceding try clause, guys. Well, as you saw in the earlier example that I actually showed you, when syntactically correct code runs into an error, Python will throw an exception error. And this exception error will actually crash the program if it is unhandled, guys. So the except clause determines how your program responds to these exceptions, guys. So instead of actually crashing our program, we can actually tell Python what to do when this particular exception occurs. We'll check out the following function, guys. So this function can basically help us understand the try and the except block. Well, the Linux interaction function can only run on a Linux system. The assert in this function will actually throw an assertion error exception if you're using it on any other operation system apart from Linux. Well, we can actually give this a try in PyCharm. So let me quickly open up that. So guys, I'm quickly here in my PyCharm. So let me quickly go ahead and select this and run it. Well, this won't say anything right now because, well, if it was actually a Linux platform, the message would have been printed, right? So let's quickly jump back to the presentation. So basically, if we run the tiny piece of code you see on the bottom, the way we actually handle the error in this particular case is because we gave out a pass, right? Well, if you were to actually run this code on a Windows machine, you would get the following output, which is already on your screen, right? So it is a blank output. You get nothing. Well, the good thing here is that the program actually did not crash, but it would be nice to see if some sort of exception occurred when you actually ran your code. Well, to this end, you can actually change the pass into something that would generate an informative message like this. Check it out. So let me quickly go ahead and run this in PyCharm. Well, as you can check it out, it says the Linux function was not executed, right? So basically this happened because I am on a Windows machine, guys. So let's quickly go back to the presentation. And guys, when an exception occurs in a program running this particular function, the program will continue as well as inform you about the fact that the function call was not successful. Well, what you did not get to see was the type of error that was actually thrown as a result of this function call, guys. So in order to see what exactly went wrong, you would need to catch the error that the function threw. Well, check out this particular piece of code I have for you guys. So here is basically where we actually capture the assertion error and we print the output message to the screen. So we have a try block, we have the same function, and we have except as error, right? So we're going to print what type of an error it is followed by a message for us, right? So running this particular case on a Windows machine will actually give us this following output, guys. So it says function can only run on Linux system, and whatever you have chosen in the print block is actually being printed for us. So let me run this in PyCharm. So as you can check it out, we have the message printed, right? So it was the same as I told you. So it was the same message as I told you before. So heading back to the presentation. Well, in the previous example, we actually called a function that we wrote ourselves, right? And after that, when we actually executed the function, we caught the particular assertion error exception and then we printed it on the screen. Well, I have for you another example where you actually open a file and use a built-in exception, guys. In fact, let us dive into PyCharm and we can actually run this and we can come back and take a look at the output. So guys, I actually came into PyCharm and I actually ran that particular piece of code. Why does it say could not open file log? Well guys, basically if the file.log does not exist, the block will give you this output, right? So it says the file could not be opened. Well, this is an informative message and our Python program is actually still able to continue to run. It has not crashed, right? Well, actually in the Python documentation, you can see that there are a lot of built-in exceptions that you can make use of. And here is one exception that I have for you guys that you can check it out. So it says exception file not found error, right? So basically this is raised when a file or directory is requested, but that doesn't actually exist. And this is just one among many that Python offers to us, guys. Well, to catch this type of an exception and to print it on the screen, we would actually use this following piece of code, guys. So in the try block, we're actually going to open it as file and we're going to read something present in it, guys. We're going to accept it by pushing a file not found error as an object, and later we actually end up printing that object, right? So let me quickly go into PyCharm and we can check it out. Well, as you can check it out, we have error number 2, which says no file or directory, right? So it's perfect. Well, you can have more than one function call in your try clause actually, guys, and anticipate catching various exceptions as well. Well, a thing to note here is that the code in the try clause will actually stop as soon as an exception is encountered. But there is one important thing that I want you guys to note down is that while catching an exception, it basically hides all of the errors, guys. Well, definitely there are some unexpected errors in your program, right? When you're catching an exception, and even these are completely hidden from you. Well, this is why basically you should avoid using bare except statement clauses in your Python programs, guys. So instead, basically what you can do is you can refer to the specific exception class that you want to catch and then handle those particular exceptions, guys. So look at this following piece of code I have for you. So here basically you first call the Linux interaction function and then later actually try to open a file, guys. So let us quickly jump into PyCharm and we can actually check it out. So as you can see, I actually executed the program, guys. Again, if the file doesn't exist, running this code on a Windows machine will give you that output, right? So it basically says that the function can run only on a Linux machine, and then we have actually printed something, guys. Well, what we actually did here is inside the try clause, we directly ran into an exception immediately, and we did not get to the part where we'll actually try to open our file.log, right? Now, basically, when you actually run it on a Linux machine, it's going to say no file or directory found. Check it out here, guys. So this is the Windows output that you get, and this is the Linux output, guys. Well, at this point, let us take a quick break and check out what are the key takeaways of this particular module, guys. So basically, a try clause is executed up until the point where the first exception is encountered. And inside the except clause or the exception handler, what we basically call it, we can actually determine how the program actually should respond to that particular exception. And we can actually manipulate multiple exceptions and differentiate how the program should respond to each of them, right? And lastly, we actually learned why we should avoid using bare except clauses, guys. And now that you're clear with this, next up I have for you is the else clause, guys. So basically in Python, using the else statement, you can instruct a program to execute a certain set of code only in the absence of exceptions, guys. Well, check out this following diagram on your screen. So basically in the try part, we have the code except when we actually want to handle the exception, or else in case there is no exception, we're going to run the piece of code that comes in under else, guys. So let me quickly walk you through the code, guys. So here is basically the same Linux interaction function, and we have an assertion error here, and we actually are going to print the error, right? So else, if there is no assertion error, so we're going to have an else clause and we're going to print saying executing the else clause, right? So let me quickly open up my PyCharm and we can run this piece of code, guys. So as soon as I go ahead and run this, it says function can only run on a particular Linux system, right? So as you can check out the output, it says the function can run only on Linux systems, right? So in this case, I have a Windows machine, so we are actually not printing the except clause here. But if you are running this on a particular Linux machine, this is the output that you would get, guys. So it says doing something and executing the else clause, correct? This happened because the program did not run into exceptions, any exceptions, right? So else clause was actually executed. Well, you can actually try to run the code inside the else clause and catch possible exceptions there as well. Well, again, we have the same Linux interaction here. We're going to print it, right? So the Linux output says doing something and no such file or directory found. Well, this is basically for the else clause and we're using the same file example here, but then we're actually trying to catch an exception in the else block as well. So the output is pretty much straightforward as well, right? Well, from the output, you can actually tell that the Linux interaction function actually ran. Well, because no exceptions were encountered, an attempt to open file.log was actually made. And that file did not exist. And instead of opening the file, you actually caught the exception, which is the file not found exception. Pretty simple, right? And I hope you guys are clear with all of the concepts that we discussed until now. And next up, we need to check out how we can actually use the finally clause, guys. Well, to begin with, imagine that you always had to implement some sort of action to clean up executing your code, guys. Well, Python basically enables you to do so using the finally clause. Have a look at the following example, guys. Check out the workflow on your screen. I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with try, except, and else at this point of time, right? So this is the chronological order that you need to go into. First, we have the try to check for an exception. Then we actually handle if there is an exception using the except, or else if there is no exception, we're going to print whatever is there in the else block. And lastly, we have something called as finally, guys. So no matter what, we're going to execute this. In case if there is an exception, the finally block is going to run. In case there is no exception, finally block is going to run there as well. So let us quickly check out a coding example, guys. So basically, this is the particular code I have for you guys. And let me jump back into my PyCharm and we can actually execute this. So guys, I'm back into my PyCharm. So let me quickly go ahead and run this. Well, as you can check it out, it says that the function can only run on Linux machines. This is because I'm on a Windows machine right now. And no matter what, right? So exception or no exception, we have this message which is cleaning up irrespective of any exception, guys. So this is basically the use of finally, guys. And that is as simple as it gets. So it's pretty much simple, right? Well, try, except, else, finally, all of this is a really simple concept. And once you understand what it actually does, you can go about doing a lot using Python, guys. Well, no matter what the Python application is, there is a very good chance that you'll actually make use of exceptions, guys. Well, on that note, let me quickly summarize the entire session for you guys. Well, in this session, we covered the following topics. Well, basically, we started out with the introduction to exception handling, and later we looked at why we actually need it, right? And then we checked out the following concepts on the screen. So we checked out race, we checked out assert, we checked out try, we checked out except, else, and finally, guys. Well, guys, I would suggest you actually take a screenshot of this right now or take a note of all of the keywords and how you can use them in Python, guys. So this will actually take you a really long way in your Python career. And knowing exceptions in Python is always an upper hand when you're coding, guys. And guys, it is at this point I would like to tell you that I have curated an in-depth video on Python meant for beginners. I am getting some really good feedback on that and I want you guys to check it out and let me know what you feel about it, guys. So we also have in-depth videos for all of the major Python concepts and so much more on the channel. I'll leave a link in the description box below, so make sure you can check it out. So that is it for this small session, guys. I hope you took away some real good points from here and that this helped you kickstart your Python learning. So thank you guys, you know what to do. If you have any queries, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel for more information on the latest technologies and all of the courses offered.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!